This is Oscar Bevis for the Stomping Ground, powered by Wow Hydrate and available on the zone from the streets of Italy to back home. Gareth Davies, how are you, my friend?
I'm very good, thank you, Oscar. Good to see you. It's been a busy weekend for the Stomping Ground, hasn't it?
It has. We've had, I would say, quite a good couple of days, some good, interesting, engaging content. But of course, I'm going to say that about myself. Look, we got a
I
few.
was talking more about Charlie, to be honest, but never mind. I'm just teasing.
Oh, 30 seconds in, been slammed already. We have got a good few talking points about today. I know we spoke only recently. Something that I'm not too aware of at the moment, I'll be honest, but something you were covering at the weekend. You was at some bare knuckle, I understand.
Yeah, bare knuckle, BYB Extreme, the big American company, have bought out the UK BYB, and um, it's incredible, the action. Dorian Darch was on there, the guy, of course, the heavyweight, who looks in fantastic shape, who has lost to Daniel Dubois and Anthony Joshua. He was halfway through the card, but there was some LT Nelson and I've got the card here. Um, LT Nelson and Barry Jones. Barry Jones was an undefeated bare knuckle fighter, super middleweight, a big amateur boxing career as well. That was the main event. I mean, it was literally a Hagler Hearns war for about 8 minutes. One other fight went to decision, but most of the others were stopped in the first round. It was an incredible 3 hours of action. It was great to call the comms, to be on comms duty. It's really quite exciting. It's in a triangular arena, sold out. Brendan and his security team from Tyson Fury and Saudi Arabia were there doing the keeping everyone safe. It was a really good night, and I do think bare knuckles growing, and I think it's going to come up, and we're going to have boxing, bare knuckle, and MMA soon. All three combat sports really succeeding in a massive way. I just think it's having its time. Obviously, boxing was 150 years ago was bare knuckle. The bare knuckle history of bare knuckle started in Britain in the 1650s. That's where it goes back to. There's writings about it, famous bare knuckle matches, all of that.
The
And
old
it was
school, the old school stance, the sort of ones you see when you see
Yeah,
the
exactly
Harry
that old
Krebs.
school
Uh,
stance. That exactly that one, like that. And how which we normally see like that. But um, I found it very interesting. It's very exciting. It's very riveting. And I think there's a lot of ex-boxers and ex-MMA guys coming into it at the moment. But I think as it develops, Conor McGregor's with the rival bare knuckle organization now, owns a part of it in America. I just think it'll really grow. I just really do think it'll grow now that events get streamed on their own channels and it doesn't need to be on linear mainstream TV, which it probably wouldn't have reached, but there's definitely a market for it. The guy that's bought it, Mike Vasquez, was a NASCAR team owner in the United States and really knows what he's doing. And, and the guys that were running it here, Jim Freeman and Joe, who owned it, they've aligned with the American organization. They're planning to do masses of events, go through all the cities. They're going to go for 3,000 venues, 1,500 venues, 2,000 venues. But I do think it'll grow, and I'm very interested to be on board and document it.
yeah, well, like you said, we've got the UFC and we've got various other MMA organizations. We got boxing riding really well. Um, with bare knuckle, if we're talking about fighters involved, you mentioned Dorian Darchu, from fighting some of our heavyweight prospects. I know a close friend of mine and Charlie's, Jamie Cox, was considering and training for bare knuckle for a little bit. When you've got,
I saw Jamie at the last London event. I think he was
yeah,
there.
and,
Yeah,
and I know he's still interested in doing so, but when you've got kind of the more elite talent, they're going to move themselves towards a career in boxing simply because financially, if you can succeed in boxing, it's a lot more fruitful. Do
yeah.
you think it could be a bit of, as it starts to grow, perhaps more of a retirement ground for now, and then it grows maybe, and in 10 years, we might start to see people perhaps pick that avenue over boxing?
I think quicker than that. If it accelerates and it grows, I think we can see people because I think they're allowed to clinch with one hand and punch in the clinch in bare knuckle. As I say, it's in a trigon. It's called. It's a triangular 21 foot by 21 foot arena. I think there will be certain people that are more suited to it. I don't think it's a sport that you're going to have a career of 2 decades in, because cuts and how your hands, obviously the gloves went on 150 years ago to protect the hands originally. And in a way has made it a more dangerous sport because people are more resilient with the gloves on. It doesn't get finished so quickly. But I agree with you. I think you've mapped it out as it will actually transpire, is that it comes down to earning capacity, doesn't it? If you can have an amazing career in bare knuckle, you'll probably go that way. But with the Olympics, the Commonwealth Games, if the Olympics happens, Commonwealth Games and the amateurs, Saudi Arabian investment at the moment, UFC and PFL and Bellator being aligned. In those other two sports, if you've got a lot of people are coming from those sports into bare knuckle at the moment, but I think it could become a younger man's sport, but it will take the sport. It'll need to go on a trajectory first to make that a viable thing for guys to make a career out of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a certain brutality about the little bits I've seen that
Oh,
I guess
unbelievable.
that's kind of like the almost the sicko inside you that likes the brutality. I know that's kind of the appeal to the UFC at times as well.
Yeah, there were 9 stoppages in this, I think it was. Yeah, I mean, everyone loves a knockout. Everyone loves it when two guys go to war and they're under pressure, but they pull a victory out of nothing. And it can happen in this because one punch can change everything. A jab can change everything. I wouldn't call it a sicko. I just think it's the appeal of the theatre and the drama, and it's quite ancient fighting with the hands, isn't it? It's an ancient thing. I think man's probably always done it. Men and women. There's women in this as well. I mean, they've got a roster of 200 people now, so it's a fairly big roster. But it is. I think it's. I rather than the sicko in us, I would just say my way of describing it is it's raw and it's visceral, and there's something incredibly thrilling about it. It gives you a lot of adrenaline. You have to come along and see one.
Yeah. Well, the fight that
You
you
can bear
mentioned,
it.
the fight that you mentioned, I am now going to make sure I watch.
Well, Jones and Nelson. Nelson's is a real brawler. He's an American, but originally his mum's South African. He's born in South Africa. Could have gone to uni. Could have worked in the family firm. But he's one of those guys that's fought in like 6 different combat sports. He's just built for it. Showed an incredible chin against the Welshman in the first round, and then got them in a clinch and just wore the battery down of Jones and stopped him in the third round. It's just non-stop action. It's unbelievable. No, they just don't stop. I mean, it was the title fights are 6 3-minute rounds, but I don't think they go 6 3-minute rounds very often, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, 100%. I'm going to make sure that I watch some, and I'll let you know what I think. Right, on to boxing. Denzel Bentley, stunning knockout of Derek Assar's. I was thinking about this walking away from York Hall. Is there something quite admirable about Denzel Bentley? The way that when he's had his 3 defeats, he's kept himself active, never really complained, never dropped to a mediocre level, if you like.
Mm.
I would say quite a good example of a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's a very good thing to point out, Oscar, that Bentley's always taken his licks. Took them against Heaney, particularly. I thought he just said, "Fair enough, best man won on the night." Beautiful work to finish the preacher, as I call Ozazi, who's a preacher, by the way. He's a very religious guy, fantastic man. Such a sly little unseen punch, and those are the punches we always say. Those are the ones that finish you, the ones you don't see coming. He will feel really made up by that victory. Assar's is solid. I know he's been inactive. You could make that argument, but it's a really, really fine finish, and it will help Denzel because that's gone viral. That knockout, and he's not known for knockouts, is he? So that's not his raison d'etre. So no, it's a brilliant performance by him. I'm very, very pleased for Denzel.
Yeah. Is the Hamza Sheeraz fight one that I guess I use the word we need to see. Obviously, it's one that he's banging the drum for because with Hamza being a Riyadh season ambassador, Denzel knows what comes with that. But is Hamza Shearer's Denzel Bentley one that brings a lot
Yeah,
of interest?
I think it will happen. Um, and it's a good fight for Denzel Bentley. That I mean, even though I'd make Hamza a marginal favourite right now, maybe even quite a decent favourite. But it's a good fight for him to have. But that fight isn't going to happen. That's not available for him. Where are we? We're in mid to late August right now. If that fight's going to happen, it's the end of the year, isn't it? And by then, you've got Chris Eubank knocking about. I still want to see Hamza Shiraz and Chris Eubank. I've got to put that in there. I'd much rather see that. I think Hamza, even though we can't write Tyler Denny off, and he's a fairy tale story, I still see Hamza as a big favourite in that as well on September the 21st in London. Yeah, it's a fight that could happen down the line. I mean, Denzel's still with Frank, isn't he, as well? So that's a fight that's not difficult to make, in my view. But I think it's an optional fight rather than a must-see.
Alois Jr., a lot different to what
Yeah,
we've seen of him so far, but having to use aspects that show you're more than just a wrecking ball is a positive on your journey up. It's a real emotion as well, like real emotion, raw, kind of drop to the knees. Was really nice to see, actually.
great story, fantastic character. I've had him in the studio at Talksport and bumped into him a few times. The traps on the man, by the way,
The beast.
he's so powerful. He is the champion on the punch machine, the Brazilinator, after Alan Brazil, as they call it in Talksport. Biggest punch.
Wait,
He's
hold on. The second to Alois Jr. is Alan Brazil.
no, it's called the Brazilinator.
Oh,
They've got
I thought all
Brazil
the people
mocked
that have
up
been
on there
through
looking.
talk sport that second is
No,
going to be Alan Brazil.
no, but he has got a dig on him, Al, though. He was a really fast footballer, by the way, very powerful feet. Al, I mean, people see him as old and big now, but no, I think Alois is the champion on the machine in the office. You've been in there, haven't you?
I have once, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Alois is the champion, and he came into the studio with us. And I remember that on the night we were live on air, we could hear this banging outside him, boom, crack, boom, crack. I think he got the record with his very first punch, and that's above everyone, Wardley and Clark and everyone. No, I think that I mean he's lost one already, isn't he? Lost one earlier in his career. He's raw. He's called the Animal, isn't he?
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
called the Animal. Yeah, I thought he was called the Animal. And I just wondered that it's the right sobriquet for him, because everyone who's sparred with him, everyone that talks to me about the work he does in the gym, he's frighteningly powerful. And you could see his joy at getting his. I think it was his first belt, wasn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Very significant moment for him. Great character. If he can stay focused and disciplined, he's going to be in a title fight soon, a decent title fight. And he's got what he's got. He's got great guys above him who he can aim towards right now. Look how much love there is in the cruiserweight division for Jaya Pataya. The cruiserweight division was made famous by Oleksandr Usyk, David Hay before him, and Evander Holyfield, and Alois. I still think he's a bit raw, but I think he's still only 21, isn't he?
Yeah,
I mean,
21. But yeah.
it's shocking. He's so mature; it's extraordinary. He's got brilliant 4 or 5 years ahead of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to see where he goes next. Coming home from York Hall, switching on the boxing, Guido Vello, a name we've had pushed over here with his links
Yeah,
to S Jam, turned in a brilliant performance against Makhmudov, who with his 2 defeats now perhaps showed, other than a physical presence, a couple of limits there.
yeah.
Not taken away from what Guido done. Put in a really, really good performance.
Yeah, I don't like using the word exposed, but there's been some exposure of something in Arslanbek Makhmudov, who's still a scary prospect. Guido Vianello was very, very well respected and highly talked of when he was in camp with Tyson Fury when Fury was boxing in America around the Vegas gyms in Los Angeles. And I met Guido a few times. He's a nice size for a heavyweight as well. He's not over big. He's big boned. He's very lean. Not lean. He's very solid. But he's in great shape. I thought he put up a terrific performance. I think it was an 8th round stoppage with the eye, wasn't it? Yeah, he couldn't go on. He was one-eyed. But that's a really significant victory for Vianello. And given the paucity of American heavyweights right now, I know he's kind of an Italian American, but he could step into the breach. He could get himself fights on the Riyadh card. Very impressed with him, Oscar. Really, very impressed with him. That's the performance that's really elevated him in his career so far.
Yeah, and I guess you mentioned in Riyadh season, that's where a performance like that would likely guide someone like Guido Vello. I want to stick with Riyadh season because Parsons done a spaces with His Excellency, and there's one thing I wanted to pick up on. Turkey said he spoke on the phone with Ryan Garcia. He'll honour his suspension, but if he can prove he's clean, he wants to get the Haney rematch and other fights from Riyadh season. I know it's been a while now, and it's something everyone has covered a million times, but where do you kind of stand with all of that now? Because time has passed. And he's a fighter that we want to see back in the ring because he's good and he's entertaining. So,
Well,
what's the balance right now?
I think he's got to serve his suspension unless they license him in some weird way in the Riyadh season. But he had something in his system. If he can prove it, fine. I don't disbelieve him. I think they came up with some level of proof from a contaminated substance. I think that's not misinformation, but I'm not absolutely certain. He is obviously suspended at the moment. What's that, 3 months ago?
Yeah, 3 months, I think, yeah.
Listen, there's no doubt that the Ryan Garcia Devin Haney rematch is enormous. Haney wants revenge. Haney looked like a man that had been terrified by a ghost in that fight. Garcia was magnificent. I think he deliberately decided he was not going to make the weight and pay the penalty. I'm really pleased to see that His Excellency Turki Alalshikh has stayed out in America and made liaisons with the likes of Shakur Stevenson, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, and all these guys, because I've said it to you before, whether on air or not. There's about 7 guys there around from 135 to almost to 147 that could all fight each other, 140 even, 147, from lightweight to welterweight, where Hagler Hearns, Leonard and Duran fought 9 times between 1980 and 1989 between them. Imagine how many times all these guys could fight each other, include Tio Lopez in that. Maybe Vasyl Lomachenko for a couple more fights, Keyshawn Davis. There's a little band of brothers there that could make they could create 3 huge events a year in the United States, real tentpole events, and a couple in Riyadh season as well. I absolutely see what His Excellency Turki Alalshikh's doing. It's only going to improve the sport in America. And the one thing that really stood out to me, a very good question by Charlie, I think you should have given a bit more breathing space to let HE speak, though, was that what's your biggest surprise since you came into boxing? It's a very good question. And His Excellency thought about it. And what he said was that people don't cooperate together. That was the biggest surprise for me. And he's really working hard. He said it's brilliant that Ben Shalom, Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren are all working together in the UK now, all actually working together, try and create the best cards. Obviously, the Saudi Arabians have got the finances to create great investments. But he's really noticing in America that there's a fissure between Al Heyman, Oscar De La Hoya, and Bob Arum. And I think he's trying to weave and work his magic to get all those guys working together. And I do think he'll succeed ultimately.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that His Excellency has stayed in America. I know you can pick up the phone and you can have conversations, as many a promoter has done, but does it need sometimes a boots on the ground, someone to actually meet in person for you
I
to
think he's obviously doing business.
realize and have better discussions?
Listen, he's a very powerful figure. He's a government figure in Saudi Arabia with a huge investment fund, public investment fund, where they do make things happen. That's why we fantasize about the fights we could or can see at the moment. No, he's clearly a workaholic and he clearly cares about boxing. And as I've said before, even to him and to his team, it's brilliant that they are, when he's given us press briefings, it's great that he's trying to look at fixing things in the sport. And that comes down to governance and people working together and delivering the fights that the fans ought to be able to see. And it is happening. We've lost Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder probably forever. That's why about every 3 or 4 days, Eddie, Hearn, His Excellency, Anthony Joshua, and others keep saying we can't lose Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua either, because we'll have ended this era without 2 of the biggest fights that should have happened, or 4 fights between them, Wilder and Joshua and Fury, not happening. It's just, you can't have that. You can't have that in a sport when you've got an era of guys who are definitely rivals and should be stepping into the ring against each other.
Yeah. One question that really interests me was, I think it was one that one of the public put to Charlie to ask on, was about box rec. One I didn't really expect. And are we going down a path where they're kind of looking for total dominance in the sport? Yes, you're going to have your promotional companies and divides, and everyone ultimately, the aim is to try and get them to work together. But even His Excellency saying that they're kind of sidelining box rec, bringing their own piece out. Do you think they're going for essentially total dominance in the sport of
No, I
boxing?
wouldn't call it total dominance.
Even the websites we read by are of Riyadh Season and His Excellency.
I'd use a different term than total dominance. I think what they're looking to do is not leave a stone unturned, so that they've got their own ability to have a deep encyclopedia on boxers in the world, to be able to create a ranking system. I mean, I don't know the absolute details, but it does look like they're trending towards wanting to do the best fights in the best weight divisions, in the strongest weight divisions. Certainly, I mean, they're doing it at heavyweight. They want to do it at light heavyweight. They're starting to look at cruiserweight. Now they're looking at lightweight and light welterweight, super middleweight. They're slowly working their way into all the divisions. So presumably, there's been rumors about taking over the sport. It's more, I think, bringing a new look to it rather than taking it over. I think, if anything, as I said, I see it as governance. There's no world governing body for boxing. So it's open in that sense. You've got the 4 you've got the IBO as well as a 5th sanctioning body, but there's no one controlling source in the sport. So if you can create what is almost a world governing body, a series of tournaments, a ranking system, an encyclopedia of all your boxers you've got signed up from the promoters you work with, you can see the way they're going. You can call it takeover, you can call it total dominance, but I see it as more of putting a system in place in the sport where the fans can actually see again who deserves to be where in the rankings. Like I was speaking to someone earlier, Moses Taumer is number 10 now in the WBO. He's not ready to be fighting some of the best fighters he is ready, weirdly, but they won't put him in with them yet. I'll just pull it up here. I've got it here. You look at Moses is at 10. Efir Jagba, Justice Hooney, Fabio Wardley, Flip Hergovich, Agit Kabayel, Jared Anderson, who's 4 still, Zhile Zhang, Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua. Now, Moses will tell you it could be all of them right now, yeah? And also got Usyk and Parker as interim and main champion. How many guys there in that top 10, not the champions, could Moses beat now right now? Efir Jagba, he might beat him. Justice Huni, he might beat him. Fabio Wardley might beat him. But does he have the experience to fight Filip Hrgovic? Does he have the experience going against Agit Kabayel? Would he beat Jared Anderson right now? I wouldn't put him in with Zhile Zhang, but you don't know. Tyson Fury and Fury's 2 with the WBO now, and Joshua 1. So I think to kind of bring it back into focus to answer your question, I think there's a
little bit of remodeling perhaps needed. That's all.
Yeah, remodeling is a good way of putting it. But what would normally happen in boxing right now without the Saudi Arabian investment? Moses Atamo looks like a future champion. He's only 19 years of age. You can create an amazing storyline around him that he can become a champion younger than Mike Tyson did. I think he's got till May next year to do it. I don't think he will. I think they'll hold him back a little bit more. In the old days, he would get built and built and built up to maybe 18 fights, 16 fights. You never know with him, with Riyadh season and everything. He might be fighting for a world title in 5, 6 fights' time. It's a difficult one, but we need to see him under pressure. We need to see him in the trenches. We need to see if he can do it, because there's no hiding place once you win a world title. There's no degree in it. There's no book on it. Once you're there, you're a target for everybody coming up, everyone.